Welcome back to online class. I am Parth Davda and this video is for class 8 science. Today we are going to learn about the chapter friction, a very special type of force which we are using in our daily lives. So let's get started with our session 1. So let's have a look at the content that we are going to cover in this particular video. The very first content will be what is friction, followed by properties of friction, then types of friction. The next one will be factors affecting friction, and finally the causes of friction. I know there is a lot of amount of friction, isn't it? So let's begin. So beginning with, what is exactly friction? Now when an object slides or tend to slide on a surface on which it is resting, then a resisting force opposing the motion is produced at the surface. This resisting force is called friction or friction force. As you can observe over here, the pushing force is towards the right hand side, so the motion will also be towards the right hand side, right? But the friction, as you can see, will be acting on the opposite direction, and that's the reason when you are rolling a ball on a surface, it tends to stop after certain amount of distance covered because of friction. So the very first part of the properties is that friction produces heat. Now you all have experienced during the winters when you are rubbing your two hands with each other, you are feeling the warmth. That is because of friction. So with that example, you can actually say that friction produces heat. The next property is, as we have already discussed, that friction is an opposite acting force. So whenever an object is trying to move, the friction is trying to stop that motion, and hence it slows down the moving object. So if at all you are rolling a ball on a cricket field, then you might observe after certain amount of distance it will stop moving. Well, you've guessed it right, that's because of friction. Now as you can see that this is an object and this is a surface. Between them we have zoomed it. If you see under a microscope, you will be able to see certain amount of irregularities as shown in the picture. Now students, this particular irregularities will be combining each other, and they will not allow the object to move. So this is a type of a static friction which we will be just understanding as the next topic. And the last thing, the friction depends on both of the surfaces in the contact. So that means that if one object is smooth and the other one is not very smooth, the friction will be different compared to if both of them were smooth. So let's head towards the types of friction. The very two basic types of friction are kinetic and static. The word kinetic itself means that something is in motion, whereas the word static means something is stagnant or is not moving. So the kinetic friction will be of two types, sliding and rolling. Means whenever an object is in contact with the other surface and it is moving, either it will be sliding on that other surface or it will be rolling on that other surface. So let us understand these types in detail. First of all, static friction. Friction experienced by a body when it is at rest is called static friction. So suppose if you are right now not moving from your own seat and just watching this video, well, you are an example of static friction as well. And if at all you are moving, then you can be either sliding or rolling, which is our next types. So the sliding friction, any friction which is experienced by a body when it slides over another body is called sliding friction. When you are sliding down a slide, that is the example of a sliding friction. That was too much of sliding, isn't it? And the third type is the rolling friction, as we have discussed. Friction experienced by a body when it rolls over another body is called rolling friction. The only change is in the kinetic type of friction, slides in the sliding friction, and over here rolls over the another body. So that's the only difference, but both of them, sliding as well as rolling, will be in motion, whereas static will be stagnant or at rest. Here in the pictures, as you can see, the static friction is when you are trying to move an object but it is not moving. Sliding friction, as we have just discussed, when you are sliding down. And the rolling friction, when a roller or a wheel kind of a substance comes down from any plank or a slope, that will be an example of rolling friction. Now here, as you can see, there is no motion because the force that we are applying and the static friction which is present between the object and the surface are equal. So the force of friction and the force that we are applying are equal, and hence there is no motion. So displacement will be 0. Now, sliding motion, we are applying the force towards the right hand side, and the friction naturally will be applying itself from the opposite side. But here there will be a motion, and at the end of certain amount of time or distance covered, you will be able to see that the object is coming to rest, just like we do after taking a slide. And the rolling friction, any kind of a roller or a wheel or a structure which can roll, when it is moving, it will be facing the rolling friction. May it be a ball or may it be just a barrel which is moving down the road. Our next thing is factors affecting friction. The very first factor affecting friction will be nature of the surfaces in contact, means the smoothness or the roughness of the surfaces. As you can see on the screen now, friction is less on a smooth surface. We consider this as a marble of the floor, and friction is more on a rough surface. We shall consider any cloth. So when this particular object will be rolling down, it will be able to cover a longer distance since the surface is smooth, compared to a shorter distance when the surface is quite rough. So that is the very first factor affecting friction, that is the nature of surface or the type of surface. The second important friction affecting factor is how hard the surface is pressed together, or in the other sense, mass or the weight of the object. Means if heavy is the object, then friction will be higher. Lighter is the object, friction will be lesser. So if a person is weighing 100 kg and is sitting on a sofa, well, he is having higher amount of static friction compared to a person who might be of lesser weight. So friction is more if the surfaces are pressed harder. As you can see, the log of wood which is quite tall but consider that the width of this one and the second one is same. Here the length of the log of wood is quite high compared to this one. So friction is less if the surfaces are not pressed harder. Basically, this one will be having, the first one on your left will be having more amount of friction compared to the second one on your right side. So the last topic for the video is the causes of friction. Well, as you already are aware of, that friction is caused due to the interlocking of irregularities between the two surfaces. This is showing the irregularities which we have discussed earlier as well. So the smooth surfaces have minute irregularities between them, whereas rough surfaces will have larger irregularities between the two surfaces. So the force of friction is more if the surfaces are rough. It's that simple. So that's the end of session 1 on friction. In the next session, we shall cover advantages, disadvantages, and ways to increase and decrease friction. All the other videos of the previous chapters are in the description below. Thanks a lot. Keep learning because learning is fun.